On a rare, quiet day in Aldea, the city seemed perfectly calm, almost too calm. Then, out of nowhere, a red-haired girl appeared, grabbing Kai's arm with urgency. She didn't even pause to introduce herself, insisting that they had to leave immediately. Before long, she was hurrying him along again, constantly pushing him to move faster. Kai, already drained by her relentless energy, could only let out a long, weary sigh. A little while later, inside a bustling tavern, the same kind of situation repeated itself. This time, it was a girl draped in a blue cloak who approached him, claiming she had finally found him as well. Her voice was smooth, almost inviting, as she told him he should come with her to her estate. Kai, clearly growing frustrated with this repeated routine, drew a deep, calming breath. He quickly refused, explaining he was busy that day. The blonde girl's eyes widened in obvious surprise. Clutching his arm tightly, she protested, asking why he couldn't come when she happened to be free. Her voice trembled as she pleaded, begging him to come play with her. Completely baffled, Kai just stared, wondering how his life had spiraled into something so strange. To make sense of it all, he had to rewind a bit to the middle of a dark forest where two bandits had first dragged him into this mess. Tense, he went along with their orders without hesitation. As night fell and the bandits settled down, they ordered him to keep watch. The hostage's ransom was too valuable to risk. Their leader added one last command. If the prisoners made noise, Kai was to beat them into silence. But in his mind, Kai already knew the captives were too weak even to cry out. Alone in the dark, he shook his head at the absurdity of his situation. Rubbing his temples, he struggled to piece together how everything had gone so wrong. Then it hit him. He remembered trying to save someone just before being hit by a truck, and somehow, impossibly, he had opened his eyes in this strange new world. Staring up at the night sky, the reality slowly sank in. He knew this world too well. Looking at the pieces in front of him, Kai realized he had somehow ended up inside the very fantasy game he had been playing not long ago. Standing near the bandits' camp, dread coiled in his stomach as he realized he'd been reincarnated right in the middle of the villain's lair. A chill ran down his spine as he cursed his luck. Then a faint noise from a nearby cart caught his attention. He moved closer, heart pounding, and froze when he saw the iron cage. Inside, three girls sat trapped in darkness, supposed hostages turned victims of circumstance. From his memory of the game, Kai knew every villain tied to this crime was destined for destruction. Being here with them meant nothing but danger. Without hesitation, he decided the only smart move was to escape immediately. He searched his pockets and found a map and some money, enough to help them on the road. After checking the possible routes, he figured they could get out without too much trouble. Still, before leaving, he gave one last glance back. Moving with careful, silent steps, he unlocked the iron cage and whispered to the captives that they needed to escape with him. The three girls inside stared at him in fear, and one looked especially weak and sickly. The red-haired girl, full of suspicion, asked if he was seriously talking about escape. Her glare sharpened as she accused him of mocking them with some cruel joke. The white-haired girl spoke in the same tone, demanding why they should trust him after everything that had happened. Kai fell silent for a moment, racking his brain for a convincing answer. Sensing his hesitation, the redhead pointed out that he clearly had nothing to say and claimed his little act had already failed. Thinking fast, Kai spun a quick lie. He had infiltrated the enemy group and apologized for being late to rescue them. Even while telling such a bold, shameless lie, he knew that gaining their trust right now was more important than anything else. Pressing them urgently, he warned that if they got caught now, it would be over for him. Unfortunately, the red-haired girl admitted her leg was badly hurt and she couldn't run. The platinum blonde confessed she was completely blind. And to make things worse, the youngest blonde, Remy, lay unconscious and sick on the floor. With a hopeless tone, the redhead said that even if they managed to escape, they would probably die somewhere along the way. She added that just knowing he wasn't their enemy was enough to make her feel grateful. Hearing that, Kai felt a heavy weight settle in his chest. At the same moment, the little blonde girl let out a faint groan, her hand trembling as she reached up. In a weak, fragile voice, she begged him for help, pleading to be saved. The moment those words hit him, Kai's expression hardened. He clenched his fist and said firmly that he wouldn't leave any of them behind. He promised to carry anyone who couldn't walk and insisted that running now gave them a better chance than staying put and waiting to die. The girls, startled by his resolve, asked what exactly he was planning. With the map in hand, Kai reassured them that he knew the area well and that everything would be fine. Once he made up his mind, he told the other two to hold on tight, lifted all three girls, and started running through the dark forest. As he ran, he quickly realized that his new body was far stronger and more durable than the one he had in his previous life. Shaking that thought aside, he focused entirely on escaping, relieved that no one seemed to be chasing them yet. He pushed forward even harder. While moving, he mentally traced the route using the map he had taken. There on the map, he saw the city of Aldea, exactly the same way he had named it in the game. That little confirmation boosted his confidence even more. Without slowing down, he led the group along the right path, until they finally reached a hidden treehouse. Quietly, he allowed himself a small moment of satisfaction. They had made it. Curious, the blind girl asked where they had ended up. With a faint smile, Kai told them it was a secret hideout he had designed himself back in the game. Standing before a magically sealed door, he tried to recall the password. He asked the girls to wait for a moment, then stepped forward toward the entrance. Placing his hand on the magic seal, he entered the keyword he had used in the game. Immediately, the door glowed blue and swung open, letting them all in safely. Once inside, he admitted he hadn't really expected this place to exist in reality. He gently laid the little blonde girl down on a bed so she could rest. The redhead, clearly impressed, commented that he was definitely no ordinary spy or agent. She noted that a treehouse like this, hidden in such a place, just didn't make sense otherwise. Kai agreed silently, but brushed it off, claiming it was nothing special. Worried, the red-haired girl quickly asked if Remy would be okay, and the room grew tense. And Kai suddenly remembered that he might have left some useful items stored here. At that point, the injured girl asked if there was anything to eat. Kai opened a wooden chest and muttered to himself as he searched for something useful. Luckily, the system worked just like it had in the game, and several potions were still preserved inside. Holding up the bottles, he announced he had found medicine, but the redhead immediately scolded him, saying an ordinary potion wouldn't save someone in such a weakened state. Calmly, Kai handed her a glowing purple vial. He explained without hesitation that this wasn't normal medicine and that it should work. The redhead's eyes widened the moment she saw the color. At the same time, Kai realized this item was quite rare and remembered he had never filled his inventory with useless junk. In the game, this potion could cure almost anything, injuries, poison, and it had been extremely difficult to make. With the vial in hand, the two girls were left completely stunned. Kai vaguely recalled that he still had over 100 of them stocked away, which meant he could probably make a fortune by selling just a few. Unable to believe it, the redhead asked who he really was to have something so valuable. Kai just sighed, a faint smirk on his lips. In a flat tone, he told them to stop asking questions, for everyone's sake. Right after that, he instructed the other two girls to drink the potion as well. Turning away, he joked that he had no desire to keep carrying 3 people around. Even then, the platinum blonde could hardly believe the legendary universal elixir was really in front of her. Kai handed her another vial, confirming he had one for her too. After a sip, the blind girl was astonished by the effect and could barely believe what had happened. Standing beside the bed, Kai praised the little blonde girl's toughness and carefully gave her the potion as well. Little by little, the glowing liquid trickled down the unconscious girl's throat. In the next moment, her entire body started to glow with a bright, almost blinding light, making it instantly clear that the potion had worked. Kai exhaled, impressed at how practical and immediate the magic's effect was. Relief washed over him. When Remy slowly opened her eyes, her voice was weak and trembling as she whispered her thanks. Gently, Kai told her she needed to keep resting. The potion could heal her body, but it couldn't restore the exhaustion of her mind. As the magical glow faded and the room dimmed, Kai picked up the empty bottles and glanced at the others. To his surprise, both the red-haired girl and the platinum blonde were already standing, fully healed. Looking at the two, Kai couldn't help but imagine the kind of reward he might ask for once he safely returned them home. But that thought vanished as the two girls broke into tears of joy, thrilled to be able to walk and see again. Awkwardly, he admitted he had no idea how long they had been suffering like that. Out of respect, he gave them some space to take in the miracle. The next day, once things had settled, their conversation picked up, and Kai learned that they had originally been kidnapped in the city of Aldea. He immediately pointed out that they were now more than 2 cities away from there. Scratching his head, he admitted that bringing them back would take quite some time. Irritated, the redhead told him he should hold the bandits responsible, since this whole mess was their fault to begin with. Frustrated, Kai asked if any of them knew teleportation magic. The redhead replied that if anyone could, they would have escaped long ago. Kai let out a sheepish laugh, admitting her logic was flawless. Secretly, he checked his own status and sighed, realizing he had ended up in the body of a low-rank hunter, far from the overpowered character he had once controlled. While studying the map, the platinum blonde explained that, historically, Only one person had ever been capable of teleportation magic. Hiding his disappointment, Kai agreed and quickly steered the conversation elsewhere. Looking at the group, he asked how everyone was feeling that day. With a gentle smile, the platinum blonde said she was still adjusting to the miracle of seeing again. A little embarrassed, the red-haired girl admitted her leg had fully healed and thanked him sincerely. Then in the next breath, the proud girl demanded he stop speaking so casually and introduced herself as the noble Karen. Following her lead, the platinum blonde introduced herself as Nina. Soon after, they confirmed that the sleeping blonde girl's name was Remy. Sweat dripping from his forehead, Kai panicked inwardly, struggling to keep all these fantasy names straight. Refocusing, he declared that their biggest problem now was figuring out how to safely return all three to their city. Karen, sounding more confident, asked if he planned to protect them from the villains, but Kai immediately dashed that hope, saying he couldn't promise anything. Shocked by his cold response, Karen flared up, demanding why he would say such a thing. With a completely serious expression, Kai explained that no one could ever guarantee victory in a real fight. Deep down, he understood better than anyone that this wasn't just a game anymore, and he wanted to avoid deadly battles at all costs, even if he already knew much of this world. To make it clear, he reminded them that they had no way of knowing how many enemies were out there, or how strong those enemies might be. If everyone wanted to survive, the most important strategy was to avoid trouble whenever possible. Each of them had only one life, and once it was gone, there would be no restarting. With firm resolve, he promised to do everything he could to lead them to safety without being forced into a fight. Karen, as blunt as ever, asked if he actually had a brilliant strategy in mind. Letting out a strained laugh, Kai admitted it was hard to think straight under her intense stare. Under her sharp, judgmental gaze, cold sweat formed as he struggled to steady himself. After forcing himself to calm down, he said the kidnappers were probably keeping watch over the city of Wafer. Pointing at the map, he explained that the bandits would assume he fled to the nearest city. Because of that, he said their safest route was to head south through the forest, reach a camp, and pay for a secure carriage there. Karen, still worried, pointed out that they had no money and couldn't possibly afford it. Patting his bag, Kai reassured them that he'd taken the bandits' money before leaving, adding they even had enough to buy fresh clothes if needed. Moved by his actions, Nina gently asked why he was helping them so much. She pointed out that he had used legendary elixirs and revealed secrets no real agent would casually expose. Faced with such sound logic, Kai stammered, struggling to come up with an answer. With no other option, he shamelessly doubled down and claimed he was an intelligence agent. To make his story more believable, Kai claimed he was just following orders from above. Right then, the little blonde girl started stirring on the bed. Noticing the movement, he asked softly if she was finally waking up. In a sleepy voice, little Remy murmured that she was, though she added that it felt a little late to be waking up. Trying to shift the topic, Kai stretched and suggested that they all wash up in the river around dusk. Nina quickly spoke up, saying she knew purification magic and could clean everyone without trouble. Always practical. Kai told her to use the spell on Remy while he went to bathe alone in the river. Karen immediately grew suspicious, remarking that it seemed strange for a secret agent not to know such a basic spell. Trying to protect his cover, he explained that relying on magic too often only drew unnecessary attention. Soon, the girls cleaned themselves in the room using the purification magic. Meanwhile, Kai enjoyed a warm bath in the river, finally able to relax for a moment. Once everyone was clean, they gathered around a fire and shared a meal together. Ready to continue their journey, Kai donned a dark suit of armor that covered him from head to toe. Leading the way, he called the girls over and said it was finally time to depart. A week later, the guards at Aldea City received an urgent alert. The main gate buzzed with tension as the soldiers hurried about. Then, to everyone's relief, the group appeared safely at the city entrance. The moment the guards recognized the three noble girls, one of them exhaled in relief, saying it was a miracle to see them alive. Karen immediately credited the armored knight for bringing them back safely. Overwhelmed with gratitude, the soldier bowed deeply and thanked him for the heroic rescue. He then asked the young ladies to wait inside until their proper escort arrived. Curious, Nina turned to Kai and asked what he planned to do next. Speaking coolly through his helmet, he said he intended to stay in the city for a while. Karen, never one to mince words, asked if he had any specific plans. Before he could answer, the guard suggested that a warrior like him probably needed to report his success to his superiors. Kai nodded without missing a beat, continuing the lie to avoid further questions. The soldier pressed, inviting the armored hero to receive a proper reward. But Kai refused, saying he had no time. Hidden behind his helmet, the exhausted boy was already at his limit. craving nothing more than a bed. Before leaving, he warned the girls to follow instructions and not let their guard down until they were safely home. With a warm smile, Karen accepted his advice and thanked him once again. In a small, gentle gesture, Kai patted Remy on the head and said his farewell. The little blonde blushed softly, responding only with a timid nod. After entrusting the girls to the guards, he turned and walked away without hesitation. The soldier, desperate to thank him properly, tried to stop him, but the knight shut that down immediately. Without looking back, he said he was just going to enter the city and disappear. The guard captain respectfully welcomed the mysterious warrior into Aldea. As the black-armored figure melted into the crowd, the soldier stood frozen in place, staring after him. The captain muttered in disbelief that the man was beyond extraordinary. Cold sweat ran down his face as he declared the armored knight a complete monster. Trying to understand, he said he had used his appraisal skill and detected a high-ranking item on the stranger. Even more astonishing, only 2 elite clans had ever cleared the dungeon where such an item could be obtained. From the reports and circumstances, the captain recalled that this man had single-handedly crushed the Red Freed Mafia. He rescued 3 hostages without a scratch and moved with incredible caution the entire time. With all that evidence, the captain became convinced he had encountered a legendary veteran. One of the younger guards, unable to hold back, complained that the captain hadn't even checked the man's identification. Angered, the captain cut him off, asking if he really wanted to treat a hero like a criminal. In a firm tone, he warned the rookie that they couldn't afford to offend someone who had saved the 3 most important young women in the region. Then another soldier remembered that the knight had handed out universal elixirs as casually as water. The captain's eyes widened instantly at the thought. As living proof, the guard explained that the noble girl's illnesses and fractures vanished the moment they drank them. Deeply impressed, the captain remarked that the knight had given away such priceless items without the slightest hesitation. The guards, all on edge, admitted that the stranger's actions were downright insane. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the captain ordered an immediate report to both high command and the guild. His subordinates rushed off at once to spread the news. After all, Karen was the daughter of the most prestigious ducal house among the nobility. Nina came from the direct bloodline of the church's sacred foundation, while little Remy was heir to the most powerful merchant family on the continent. Putting all this together, the captain realized the masked knight had meddled in the affairs of the greatest powers in the land, without a hint of fear. To the captain, the man carried divine-grade items, refused any reward as if it meant nothing, and moved as if ordinary concerns didn't exist. In his mind, there was only one explanation. This mysterious knight must belong to one of the Empire's secret forces. Completely detached from the chaos he caused, Kai walked through the city with wonder in his eyes. Paying close attention, he realized the streets looked exactly like they had in the game. Even from a distance, he spotted the grand building of the Hunters Guild. Though he wanted to explore every corner, his body was utterly drained. To make matters worse, everyone on the street kept staring at him. When a small boy stared especially hard, he started wondering what the fuss was about. He had assumed armored citizens would be common, but soon realized his rare gear glowed faintly, drawing far too much attention. Exhausted, he decided that reaching an inn was his top priority. Then, out of nowhere, a little girl grabbed his leg, shouting excitedly that he looked amazing. Caught completely off guard, Kai froze in the middle of the street. Meanwhile, inside a grand mansion, a cry of relief echoed through the halls. With tears streaming down his face, Karen's father clutched his daughter, sobbing with relief. Karen, losing patience, told him to calm down, breathe properly, and stop embarrassing himself. Amid the emotional chaos, her father noticed she was standing perfectly fine and immediately apologized for the scene he caused, smiling proudly. Karen said her leg had been healed by a universal elixir and spun lightly to show she was fully recovered. Her eyes gleaming, she explained that the mysterious knight had produced the legendary potion as casually as if it were nothing. Animatedly, she added that he handed it over without hesitation and even refused any reward. Intrigued, the nobleman read the written report carefully to confirm the details. As he studied it with him, Karen noticed a new point and asked if Kai had truly acted on his own. Calmly, her father explained that he had sent no one and added that if he himself had possessed a universal elixir, he would have used it on her long ago. Karen fell into thought, concluding that the so-called agent must have lied to calm them during the escape. The head of the family studied the matter carefully and decided the knight likely belonged to intelligence because he knew about the Red Freed Mafia. In his view, the man clearly had inside knowledge of the syndicate, though his mission had only been to rescue the girls, meaning he may have bent his organization's rules in the process. Wanting to help, Karen's father decided to send an official letter of thanks so the savior could be protected. Karen immediately grew uneasy, saying that doing so would attract too much attention and could worsen any punishment the agent might face. She then asked if her father had any idea which secret organization the man belonged to. In a serious tone, he revealed that he had received word 2 days earlier that Red Freed had already been captured. Looking at the map, he realized the knight deliberately circled around Waffer to avoid drawing the bandits' attention. Karen quickly pointed out that this move proved just how sharp and tactical the knight really was. The Duke noted that everything about the man perfectly matched his suspicions. Fixing his gaze on his daughter, he revealed that the force responsible for capturing the Mafia was the Verdar Direct Control Squadron. Stunned, Karen repeated the name of the Empire's most feared organization. In practice, the Verdar Squadron operates directly under Imperial command, maintaining public order by any means necessary. Rumor even has it their members are the greatest hunters alive. In other words, they are elite among elites, the absolute pinnacle of military power. Because of that, the Duke concluded that the savior must be a high-ranking individual trusted with independent missions. For the knight's sake, he told Charon to keep everything secret and not expose his identity. As a show of gratitude, the Duke vowed to repay the debt no matter the cost. Since the warrior had vanished somewhere in the city, he ordered Charon to summon the maid Lifia and begin a search immediately. Charon agreed without delay and rushed from the room. Left alone in his office, the Duke sank into his armchair and began to reflect. In the depths of his heart, he prayed that the knight truly was an important pillar of Verdar, because that was the only thing standing between him and serious trouble. The Duke, understanding the way power plays in this world, also knows that the other two influential families are probably already on the hunt for the masked man. The next morning, the inn feels quiet, almost sleepy. Kai sits down to a hearty steak, and the innkeeper leans over, thanking him for keeping the place trouble-free. While chatting, the owner mentions how remarkably polite the man in black armor has been. Kai chews thoughtfully, listening to the praise with an expression that doesn't betray a thing, completely unaware of how strange the situation has become. Riding the calm moment, the innkeeper asks if Kai has come from far away. Kai just nods quietly in response. Suddenly, the tavern door swings open. A soldier storms in, demanding everyone's attention. "Has anyone seen a knight in black armor around here?" he calls, urgency in his voice. At that, Kai and the innkeeper exchange a sharp, startled glance. Fear prickles up Kai's spine as he silently pleads for the owner to shield him. With practiced ease, the old man looks the soldier in the eye and lies, saying he's seen no such person. He even adds that the Duke is clearly overreacting. The guard isn't convinced and presses him again, insisting on an answer. The innkeeper breaks into a cold sweat, but maintains his calm, steady voice. Kai, watching silently, thanks every god he can think of for the man's acting skill. Finally, letting out a frustrated sigh, the soldier accepts the explanation, nods, and thanks the innkeeper before leaving. The door clicks shut, and the inn returns to its quiet. But just as Kai starts to think the danger has passed, another figure steps inside. It's a nun from the Holy Church, looking for a man in black armor. The innkeeper quickly nudges Kai behind the counter and scrambles for another excuse. With a polite smile, he tells the nun he hasn't seen anyone like that. Satisfied, she thanks him and moves on. Barely a moment passes before yet another messenger storms in. This one from the Merchant Council. Kai, nearly in tears, crouches behind the counter, curling into himself to stay hidden. Once more, the innkeeper spins the same flimsy excuse, keeping Kai safe. Eventually, the guard gives up, muttering about his failure as he leaves. Kai remains trembling under the counter. Once the coast is clear, the innkeeper calls him out. Terrified, Kai slowly crawls forward, trying to make sense of the chaos that just passed. The old man holds his head, disbelief written all over his face, asking what kind of crime Kai could have committed to have the city's top 3 powers all looking for him at once. Completely baffled, Kai insists he has no clue what he might have done wrong, wondering if he accidentally triggered some huge mistake. The innkeeper, nearly desperate, urges him to resolve the situation quickly before the tavern gets dragged into trouble and shut down. Stuck in this mess he never saw coming, Kai can only wonder how he's supposed to vanish now. Far away, Karen's older sister examines the redhead's leg, making sure she's truly healed. Karen, sitting calmly, says it no longer hurts at all, and that she feels completely fine. On the bed, She thanks her sister for all the care she's given her over the years and admits she'll miss their old daily routines. Her sister smiles softly, happy with the improvement, but also feeling a subtle emptiness as their old habits come to an end. Before long, Karen's thoughts drift back to the masked knight. She wonders aloud how someone so obvious hasn't been found anywhere in the city. To her, it's clear Kai is deliberately throwing the searchers off. Her sister agrees, adding that their father thinks the same thing. Quietly, Karen admits she's worried that the knight might get punished for handing out a legendary elixir. Hands on her hips, she remembers how he even pretended the potion came from his own supply. From her perspective, the masked warrior did everything he could to hide any link to the organization he serves. With a long sigh, Karen admits she can only hope he doesn't face a terrible penalty. Her sister, a little amused, points out that it's rare to see Karen so worried and cute at the same time. Karen shrugs awkwardly, insisting the knight saved them all by himself. So naturally, he deserves that kind of concern. Blushing, she crosses her arms and complains about being teased. In Karen's eyes, the knight truly risked his own life to rescue them, even if it meant putting himself in danger with his own organization. She adds that Nina's and Remy's families feel the same way. Still, Karen insists she's the one thinking about their savior the most. Her sister bursts out laughing, teasing that this must be love. Meanwhile, back at the inn, the owner tries to calm Kai, assuring him that he really hasn't done anything wrong. Even with that bit of comfort, whispers still rippled through the streets, and the hunt for the Black Knight was getting fiercer by the hour. The old man, blunt as ever, pointed out that no one in the city could possibly be the masked warrior except Kai himself. Kai felt trapped, every alley and corner closing in on him. He couldn't help but wonder what kind of punishment awaited him if the rumors were true. The innkeeper explained grimly that, at worst, the three great families could simply exile him from the city forever. He looked at Kai with a twinge of pity, admitting that sheltering him weighed heavily on his conscience, but still urged him not to switch sides now. To make things worse, the reward for any tip leading to Kai had already climbed to 3 million at the city council. Kai's eyes went wide. "Then why haven't you turned me in already?" he blurted. The innkeeper chuckled, shaking his head at Kai's reaction. The three families were handling everything quietly, he explained, keeping the public out of it. Finally, the old man suggested that Kai suit up again, step outside, and at least enjoy the festival while he still could. Mentally exhausted, Kai nodded and left the counter, his head hanging low. Wishing him luck, the owner called after him, reminding him to make the most of his time in the city while he could. Slightly cheered by that thought, Kai decided he might as well enjoy one last day before getting kicked out tomorrow. As he strolled through the streets, the sun dipping toward the horizon, he tried to spot a small bright side in his ridiculous situation. That's when his eyes caught the city's towering clock tower. Back in the game, he'd always loved climbing it at this hour, even knowing the entry fee was outrageously high. He headed straight to the ticket booth without a second thought. Determined to relive those memories, he climbed floor after floor, taking in the sprawling view around him. And when he finally reached the top, he was caught off guard. The top should have been empty, but someone was already there, quietly taking in the scenery. An elegant woman, dressed all in black, stood beneath the open sky, her face concealed by a mysterious mask. Sensing his approach, the red-haired woman slowly turned to face him. Kai froze for a moment, stunned by how breathtakingly beautiful she was. He stammered, barely managing a simple greeting. With serene politeness, she responded, welcoming him to the top of the tower. In that instant, Kai remembered a rumor from the game about a secret encounter with a woman at this very tower. Staying cautious, he kept his distance, unsure if this was that moment. In a soft, gentle voice, the masked woman praised the view, calling it the perfect place to clear one's mind. Kai nodded in agreement. The scenery really was breathtaking. Curious, she asked what had brought him up there. Looking slightly down, he admitted he needed a quiet place to sort through the troubles on his mind. Then she changed the subject, asking if he knew the man in black armor. The question made him swallow hard, and a surge of fear shot through him. Had his identity been exposed? Forcing a nervous smile, he brushed it off and said that the Black Knight had become the talk of the city. The woman admitted honestly that she too had been searching for that hero, and was eager to meet him in person. Uneasy, Kai asked if the Black Knight had done anything wrong. She laughed softly, assuring him that he wasn't wanted for any wrongdoing. Soon after, she explained that the authorities simply wanted to show their gratitude, though the details had been kept secret. Hearing that, Kai felt some weight lift off his shoulders. Just knowing he wasn't being hunted for punishment eased a lot of his tension. At that moment, a luxurious carriage rolled up to the base of the tower. Seeing it, the masked woman realized her ride had arrived. Kai, curious, asked if she really had to leave already. With effortless grace, she said that progress in the search awaited her and offered a soft farewell. As she descended the stairs, she left a lingering air of mystery behind. Alone again on the observation deck, Kai watched her leave. For a moment, he just stood there, unable to guess who the masked woman really was. Outside, she stepped into the carriage and found Karen waiting inside. Eager and impatient, the little redhead insisted they wear masks while searching the city so they could spot Kai without drawing too much attention. Karen's sister immediately teased her, complaining that she'd only been dragged along as an extra in one of Karen's reckless plans. She let out a soft laugh and apologized for the younger girl's boldness, admitting that, in the end, she was just relieved her sister had come to fetch her from the tower. During the carriage ride, the masked woman casually mentioned meeting a young man up at the clock tower. Given all the rumors surrounding that place, Karen immediately suspected he had been snooping into the city's search efforts. The woman smiled calmly, reassuring her that while she had been cautious at first, their conversation had been completely peaceful and free of hidden motives. For her, it had been a rare and strangely serene moment. She explained that she had carefully asked him about the Black Knight, just to test him. But the young man seemed utterly unaware of anything. Karen, disappointed, muttered that her father had already started to suspect Kai had left the city. Then, without warning, the masked woman mentioned one striking detail about the young man from the tower, and Karen froze instantly. Her curiosity sharp, she demanded to know exactly what he looked like. The woman described him as a handsome young man with a calm aura and a scar on the left side of his face. Karen immediately shouted that the Black Knight had that exact same scar. Without a second thought, she yanked open the carriage window in desperation. Shouting at the driver, she ordered him to turn around and head straight back to the tower. Startled by her outburst, her sister asked if she was really serious about such a wild conclusion. But Karen, heart racing, realized the stranger from the tower could very well have been Kai in disguise. Angry that no one had told her sooner, she explained that the scar was a secret known only to her and their father. Her sister, finally grasping the significance, fell silent, utterly stunned. The carriage took a sharp turn on the empty road and sped back without delay. As soon as it stopped, the two sisters jumped out and sprinted toward the clock tower as fast as they could, hope burning in their chests. They prayed they'd reach the top before Kai disappeared. By the time they arrived, both were gasping for breath. But to Karen's despair, the terrace was already empty. Kai had already gone. Elsewhere in the city, the Treasure Hunters Guild headquarters stood tall. Inside, the guildmaster was tearing his hair out, frustrated that he still had no clue about the Black Knight's whereabouts. Going over the latest reports, he concluded the masked man was almost certainly a member of the imperial force known as Veltar. By all accounts, Kai had single-handedly rescued the daughters of the three most powerful families in the region while crushing the Red Freed Syndicate. Looking at the scale of it all, the guildmaster noted that kidnapping noble daughters of that rank was basically the same as an attack on the empire itself. Given a crisis like that, it made perfect sense for Veltar to intervene personally. To make matters worse, he griped that no one in the city had managed to make contact with the Black Knight. Desperate, the guildmaster even ordered his subordinates to bump into the man by accident if necessary, just to spark a conversation. But fate had other plans, because when a little girl did run into him, Kai just helped her up and kept walking. The spies were left speechless, unable to do anything but thank him and watch him vanish into the crowd, defeated. The guildmaster sighed, wishing only that the Black Knight would return to the capital soon, before creating more complications. Then suddenly the office door burst open. The receptionist, clearly panicked, announced that the masked man had just entered the guild. Thinking it was a joke, the master told her to stop fooling around. But seeing the open doorway and her expression, he realized she was serious. Inside the main hall, the imposing black armor immediately drew the attention of every hunter present. The guildmaster rushed forward to greet the distinguished visitor. Behind him, the receptionist barely held back a laugh at how quickly his demeanor had changed. The hunters themselves struggled to contain their amusement, noting how absurdly polite their usually rough superior had suddenly become. Sweating, the guildmaster asked what had brought such an important figure to their guild. Trying to hide his own unease, Kai replied that he'd only come to take a look around. Immediately, the master bent over backward with exaggerated courtesy, thanking him for honoring the guild with his presence. Inside his mind, however, the master was already spinning countless conspiracy theories about that simple remark. Hear him say, "Take a look around." He thought, interpreting it as reconnaissance disguised as a casual visit. Within seconds, he decided there was no way he could outmaneuver someone so far above him. In short, the guildmaster convinced himself that he was dealing with a terrifyingly strategic force. Kai had once dreamed of joining Veltar, but lacking the strength, that dream had always felt out of reach. Now, standing before the living embodiment of that ideal, he could only stare and feel the vast distance between them. Maintaining his respectful composure, the guildmaster invited the masked warrior to his office if he wished to take a closer look around. Kai accepted immediately, assuming that such courtesy was just standard guild protocol. As they climbed the stairs, whispers erupted throughout the hall. At the tables below, hunters eagerly swapped their own theories. For many, it seemed like pure spectacle, a story blown out of proportion, yet some couldn't help but notice the calm, almost unnerving presence of the man. More than that, he moved with such relaxed confidence, as if daring anyone to make the first move. From that, they figured he must be strong enough to take down anyone there without breaking a sweat. A chill ran through the hall. Some hunters even instinctively stepped back, convinced that in a face-to-face fight, the entire guild would stand no chance. Deep down, more than one wondered if this masked knight could even challenge an S-rank beast. Meanwhile, Kai silently endured the thought of guild members spreading even more absurd legends about him. With every step, it felt like the rumors surrounding him were growing larger, harder to control. After the brief visit, the guildmaster personally escorted him back to the entrance. Still sweating from the tension, Kai silently promised himself he never wanted to step foot in that guild again. He vented quietly, recalling that while he expected questions, the atmosphere had been oddly surreal. The fear and reverence in everyone's eyes made him shiver. What puzzled him even more was that the guildmaster had been polite, not rude, completely unlike the game version he remembered. He couldn't figure out why, but he kept wondering how he had ended up getting VIP treatment from the hunters. Still, despite the awkwardness, the visit had at least given him a chance to explore the city and break his boredom. Determined to keep moving, he stepped back out onto the streets. But it didn't take long for him to realize that peaceful sightseeing was impossible while standing out in such flashy armor. Then he heard the abrupt halt of a carriage right behind him. Karen leapt out immediately, pointed straight at him, and triumphantly announced she had finally found him. Kai froze, spotting the crest on the carriage. It belonged to Karen's noble house. Unfazed, Karen demanded to know where he had been hiding all this time. Pointing vaguely to the side, he admitted he had spent the whole time at the downtown inn. Shocked, she complained that the tavern owner had lied straight to her face when claiming not to have seen the Black Knight. Kai's mischievous grin appeared. He confessed that he'd asked the innkeeper for that little favor. Karen immediately deflated, speechless at the thought that an old tavern keeper had fooled her. Trying to play it off, Kai suggested maybe he was just naturally good at hiding. Annoyed, Karen grumbled that she didn't want to hear any more weak excuses. At that moment, a soft feminine voice from inside the carriage caught her attention. Kai recognized it instantly, from her voice and hair. The woman from the clock tower stepped out gracefully, mask removed, and formally introduced herself as Lithia. With calm sincerity, she apologized for the delay and thanked him once again for rescuing them. In a gentle voice, she asked if the knight had a little free time now. Already anticipating trouble, Kai muttered to himself, wondering what might happen if he accepted. Karen quickly reassured him. It was just a request to visit the mansion and receive a formal expression of gratitude. Without hesitation, Kai curtly replied that he was busy and refused on the spot. Despite everything he'd done, he genuinely feared that a single misstep in front of high-ranking nobles could be fatal. Noticing his nerves, both sisters let out soft chuckles. Karen, however, had no intention of letting him refuse. She grabbed his hand, cheeks flushing, insisting that at least this once he should allow the family to thank him properly. Then, wrapping herself around his armored arm, she began dragging him toward the carriage. Utterly defeated, Kai climbed into the vehicle, resigned to whatever fate awaited him. During the ride, Karen smiled, pleased that she had finally caught the runaway hero. From Kai's perspective, though, it felt less like an invitation and more like being arrested and taken into custody. Lithia expressed her heartfelt thanks, explaining that Kai's rescue hadn't just saved their lives, it had preserved the honor of their entire duchy. Kai, quietly resigned, admitted to himself that the chaos around him was finally starting to make a little sense. Then Karen pointed at him again, declaring there was still one very important question she needed answered. Hidden behind his helmet, Kai inwardly groaned at Karen's stern and intimidating tone. Soon, the redhead lost patience, dropping the formal act and reverting to her usual fiery self. Nodding briefly, the Black Knight told her to stop stalling and just ask. Karen got straight to the point, demanding to know if he had really thrown away a fortune in legendary potions during the rescue for no reason. Burdened by guilt, she admitted that she had started to believe he'd vanished from the city altogether. Thinking he must have run into trouble with his organization, in a reassuring tone, Kai told her that the potions belonged to him, and there was no problem at all. Hearing that, Lithia's eyes went wide, as she silently confirmed that the potions had really been real. Karen, still worried, asked if keeping such a huge treasure for himself wasn't dangerous. Pressing him anxiously, she demanded a clear explanation of how he had even obtained such items. Inside the helmet, Kai panicked, unsure how to come up with an excuse to dodge the conversation. Cornered, he realized his only option was to convince the sisters that everything was under control. As a final move, he calmly said he had no regrets, and the only thing that mattered was that Karen's leg had healed. Then, with an unexpectedly gentle charm, he told her to just enjoy her life and let him handle his own problems. The little redhead immediately blushed bright red, and silence fell over the carriage. Lithia, equally impressed, thanked him once more for his kindness. Trying to shift the mood, Kai raised one finger and said he had a small favor to ask. The sisters' eyes immediately locked on him, curious about what he might request. Outside, the carriage continued rolling through the city streets toward the Duke's mansion. With unusual seriousness, Kai asked them to step in if he accidentally acted rudely in front of their father. Karen's eyes widened in disbelief, unable to grasp why someone like him would ask for something so simple. In utter shock, she exclaimed that he had given away a legendary potion without even asking for payment. Trying to justify himself, he lied that he was just a commoner, terrified of offending nobles. Deep down, he knew that staying alive and avoiding execution was the greatest reward he could hope for. For a quiet moment, the sisters exchanged a glance, clearly processing his flimsy excuse. To Lithia, someone hiding behind such a weak fear while carrying himself with such dignity seemed deeply suspicious. From the way he dodged the real question, she could tell the excuse had been poorly crafted, almost as if he expected them to accept it without digging deeper. Even so, she agreed to his request and promised to help if needed. Karen crossed her arms, insisting her father would never be angry with the man who had saved their family. Lithia politely promised to smooth over any mistakes he might make during the meeting. Then teasingly, Karen asked if he intended to keep his helmet on the entire time, resting one hand on the back of his neck. Kai admitted that it would be rude not to show his face. Karen laughed, clarifying that she didn't mind the armor, but she really wanted to see his face without it. Her words made her blush furiously, and Lithia scolded her for being so shamelessly direct. Caught off guard by the sisters' little quarrel, Kai could only sit there and watch. Lithia, however, smiled softly, enjoying the playful exchange between her sister and their savior. In her heart, she had already begun to see the masked warrior as the most sincere and honorable man she had ever met. To her, his cowardly commoner hiding an armor act was obviously just a front to protect the secrets of his imperial organization. Faced with such modesty despite overwhelming strength, she couldn't blame her sister for clearly falling under his spell. From her experience, the more famous a hero became, the prouder and more arrogant he usually got. Worse, the people around them often became consumed by envy and greed. Almost always, warriors flaunted their wealth, status, and power at every opportunity. Yet the man before her had faced a deadly mafia and rescued noble daughters, all while remaining humble and restrained. Because of that, she felt their family owed him a debt that could never truly be repaid. What she admired most was that he never once tried to exploit their vulnerability. Trying to break the tension, Karen admitted she was starting to feel genuinely nervous about the upcoming visit. Sensing the opening, Kai teased her, saying she wasn't as cool as she liked to pretend if she got nervous so easily. Karen immediately pointed at him and shouted that she wasn't scared, just tense because of all the preparations. Lithia laughed warmly at her younger sister's outburst and found the entire scene genuinely amusing. In Lithia's eyes, the secretive knight had deliberately teased Karen, knowing it would help her relax. As the dupe's daughter, Karen had grown up surrounded by fake smiles, scheming nobles, and painfully dull politicians. Because of the rigid hierarchy in these social games, many noble girls kept their distance from her at gatherings. To make matters worse, most young men only approached her with their eyes on a future political marriage. As a result, Karen had never truly had a friend with whom she could be an ordinary girl. In the end, other nobles simply walked past, pretending not to notice her loneliness. That's why Lithia felt such joy watching Kai tolerate her sister's antics with patience, and even a bit of humor. Unable to bear the slow pace any longer, Karen grabbed her sister's arm and demanded they hurry back to the mansion. Sitting quietly nearby, Kai could only sigh, watching the sisters stir up another little storm. In Lithia's mind, he had hidden his strength and stayed quietly in the carriage to spare the Duke's family any embarrassment. On top of that, he had handed over a medicine valuable enough to buy entire cities without asking for a single coin. The noblewoman found herself completely captivated, doubting there was any other man with such a pure heart. Warmth rising to her cheeks, she began thinking of ways to keep a man like him close to the family. Switching to a more practical tone, Lithia asked how long the knight intended to remain in the city. With his usual relaxed charm, he praised the city and said it would depend entirely on his mood. To Lithia, that vague answer only confirmed that his movements were dictated by secret missions from the organization behind him. Reflecting on that, she realized that as long as a knight like him fought in the shadows, the entire empire would stay safe. Captivated, she wondered if it was selfish to want him to stay in the city. Deep down, she realized Karen's strong feelings for him were slowly influencing her own. Completely unaware of the storm he'd caused, Kai simply adjusted himself in the carriage seat and tried to stay comfortable. When the ducal mansion finally came into view, its sheer grandeur could overwhelm any visitor. Without delay, the knights dismounted and opened the carriage doors for the sisters. In the central courtyard, dozens of servants and guards stood in formation, creating a long ceremonial corridor to welcome them. Kai, faced with such a display, was utterly bewildered, wondering what on earth was happening. Lithia, delighted by the reception, explained that this was the family's highest possible display of respect. Overwhelmed, Kai nearly lost his tough, composed act on the spot. Hiding his panic, he warned that such a grand fuss would only draw unwanted attention. Lithia, smiling confidently, replied that anyone who found fault would answer to the household guards. Swallowing hard, Kai accepted the ceremonial escort, internally worrying about what might happen to anyone who failed to show proper respect. By the cruel logic of noble society, he knew that refusing such a welcome could be far more dangerous than accepting it. Then, without warning, the head maid and the captain of the guard knelt directly on the stone floor. Bowing their heads, they declared it an honor to receive the black hero at the mansion. A moment later, the elderly housekeeper rose and respectfully announced that the masters were already waiting in the main hall. With a graceful curtsy, Lithia thanked the staff and said she and Karen would go change first. Joking lightly, she added that she'd wait in another room in case the knight needed the small help they had promised earlier. Karen nodded seriously, saying she would act quickly if anything went wrong. Left alone at the entrance with the guards, Kai immediately began sweating again. Moments later, the captain approached and offered to guide him personally. With perfect courtesy, the soldier asked if he might hold the warrior's black sword for safety while entering the mansion. Handing over the weapon so quickly left the captain visibly surprised, asking if the knight was truly certain. Kai, keeping things casual, replied that it was normal to remove one's weapon inside a noble residence. Then, in a tone far too sincere to be comforting, he added that he was actually far more dangerous fighting without a sword than with one. The servant's eyes went wide in disbelief. The captain swallowed hard, terror creeping into his expression, realizing just how monstrous that statement sounded. Beneath the helmet, however, Kai wasn't exaggerating at all. He spoke with complete seriousness. Back when he had still been a player in the game, he had been reincarnated into a body with absurd physical capabilities. His reflexes were so unnaturally sharp that weapons often interfered with his rhythm. For that reason, he genuinely felt his bare hands were better suited for crushing enemies than any blade. The captain, of course, knew nothing of that reasoning. To him, the stranger looked less like a man and more like some dark lord of death. Following the old maid, the armored figure continued through the mansion corridors. When he finally stopped before the main hall door, Kai felt his heart hammering in his chest. Resting his hand on the doorknob, he closed his eyes for a moment, silently hoping the meeting would wrap up quickly, and without anyone getting hurt. Meanwhile, out in the courtyard, the captain of the guard couldn't take his eyes off the black sword resting in his hands. According to the system of this world, that divine blade was unbreakable, unchippable, and capable of slicing through anything, no matter how solid. Seizing the moment, the captain grinned and jokingly offered Karen a chance to hold it. Under his careful supervision, of course. The little redhead shot forward like a whirlwind, her excitement barely contained. She almost leaped at him, desperate to feel the legendary sword her savior wielded. Eyes sparkling, she couldn't look away from the polished black steel. She demanded the captain show it to her properly. Amused, he presented the blade, its edge gleaming like a dark jewel honed to perfection. Karen tilted her head, murmuring that the sword was almost too beautiful, almost impossible to imagine being used in battle. The captain chuckled, agreeing that it seemed more like an artwork than a weapon. Sunlight caught the black metal just right, making it shimmer hypnotically. Karen rested a hand on her chin, wondering what kind of fighting style a warrior like him must use if he didn't rely on weapons. In her mind, he had to be some tactical genius, valuing precision and speed over brute strength. Distracted by the thought, she reached out to touch the sword herself, and instantly, its impossible weight slammed into her awareness. Startled, the captain lunged forward as she pitched toward the ground. Without the strength to control it, The little noble lost her balance, and the sword slipped from her hands, plummeting toward the stone courtyard. It cut through the stone as if it were nothing more than soft butter. For a stunned moment, silence fell over the courtyard. Karen stared, wide-eyed, unable to process what she had just done. She couldn't even form the words. Her mind went blank. The captain and Lithia cried out in shock as they watched the stone split cleanly. Not a trace of resistance. In that instant, Lithia realized with brutal clarity that no armor could stop a strike like that. Shaking, the captain remembered the warrior's earlier warning that he could be even more dangerous without the sword. He dashed forward immediately, checking Karen for injuries. Stammering, he swore that if anything had happened, he'd tell the Duke it was completely his fault, not hers. Inside the mansion, the meeting in the main hall had begun, set over a delicate tea service. Outside the doors, the sisters listened quietly. From inside, the Duke's deep voice carried, offering heartfelt thanks to the masked hero for all he'd done. Karen blinked, surprised to hear her father sounding far humbler than usual. Lithia gave a small nod. The reason should already be obvious, she said silently to herself. Even just listening from the doorway, the sisters realized that the mighty Duke had bowed his head before the masked man. By necessity, he usually had to act superior to avoid looking weak, but now gratitude had softened him completely. Lithia pressed a hand to her chest, sighing softly. Seeing her father humbled like that, Karen felt a pang of sadness over how their family had been forced to bow because of the kidnapping. Lithia dryly asked if Karen still had time to complain. The younger girl blinked in confusion, not understanding why her sister sounded so sharp all of a sudden. With merciless clarity, Lithia reminded her that she had just destroyed the stone courtyard of the ducal mansion. Karen froze instantly. She suddenly remembered she had wrecked the main walkway with someone else's divine sword. Tears threatening, she wailed that her father would surely kill her for this disaster. Lithia pointed a finger at her, adding that she'd also betrayed the captain's trust, who'd only let her hold the weapon because he believed in her. Karen started whisper shouting in panic, insisting no one had warned her. It would be that heavy or that insanely sharp. Lithia watched her younger sister collapse into despair, barely holding back laughter. Even as she tried not to laugh, she told Karen to stop whining. After all, she reminded her, Karen was healthy now, with her whole life ahead to enjoy what she had once been denied. Instantly, Karen brightened, declaring she would make the most of her restored legs. Lithia smiled softly, happy to see that spark return. Karen finally seemed calmer. Shifting the conversation, Lithia noted that Kai had clearly tried to hide his true power. If the Emperor ever found out he'd casually used a legendary elixir, the warrior could be in serious trouble. Because of that sacrifice, Karen vowed to reward the masked man in every way she could. Lithia recalled a strange detail from the report and spoke her doubt aloud. From everything she'd heard, the man had refused any reward, acting as if rescuing them had been nothing special. In any ordinary world, even a simple offer from a duke would have overwhelmed a normal person. Money, land, power, influence. No one in their right mind would ever turn down an offer from one of the Empire's top noble families. Yet even so, Lithia admitted quietly that what she truly longed for was nothing more than a glimpse of his face once again. Karen immediately blurted out her protest, insisting she should be the only one allowed to see him. Lithia laughed softly, teasing her, saying she sounded jealous, like she wanted to hoard the warrior all for herself. Karen, cheeks burning, tried to defend herself, insisting she had only noticed the scar near his eye when he saved her. Hearing that, Lithia suddenly understood so much more than before. Karen's obsession wasn't so hard to read now. The redhead immediately frowned, denying she had any deeper feelings for the stranger. A heavy silence fell between the sisters, charged with unspoken tension. Karen, completely flustered, insisted it was just gratitude, nothing more, absolutely nothing. While the younger girl wrestled with her own confusion, the air in the adults' room remained unbearably tense. Clutching her tea, Karen prayed silently that her father wouldn't scare off their savior. In the main hall, the atmosphere was equally stifling. The pressure in the room felt almost tangible. The Duke and Duchess sweated through their composure, staring at the towering figure of the black-armored knight with clear dread. Across from them, he sat perfectly still, not even a twitch to betray his thoughts. Unable to read the warrior's posture, the Duke found himself wondering why he hadn't demanded anything in return yet. In the nobleman's mind, the stranger's silence was a deliberate act of humility, meant not to embarrass their family. Out of sheer consideration, the Black Knight showed no hint of claiming the debt owed to him. Having saved their daughters, he now stood in a position where the Duke couldn't refuse any request he made. Given the family's suspicion toward Verdar and the Empire, the Duke assumed this young warrior must be backed by the highest echelons of power. In other words, He had enough influence to crush any politician who dared stand against him, and the fact that he gave nothing away behind that armor made him all the more terrifying to the duchy's rulers. Sitting rigidly on the sofa, the Duchess quietly suggested to her husband that this whole meeting might be some kind of loyalty test. Thinking fast, the Duke decided that treating a guest like this without complete formality would be recklessly dangerous. Caught in the tension, he began spinning one elaborate theory after another in his head. To him, the warrior's silence didn't feel like calm restraint. It felt like an ultimatum, delivered from the shadows. And to make matters worse, he realized that if this masked man left the mansion without proper recompense, the entire ducal family would be disgraced. Then the knight shifted slightly in his seat, and the metallic clink of armor echoed through the hall, freezing everyone in place. The Duke nearly held his breath, convinced the guest had finally run out of patience. Right then, he knew there was no room for even the smallest mistake in this exchange. Using the sacred elixir as an opening, he finally forced himself to speak and offer some form of compensation. With a tone both polite and direct, the Duke began, saying his family felt deeply honored. Still trembling with fear, he apologized for taking so long to present a reward worthy of such a hero. Inside his helmet, Kai let out a nearly silent sigh of relief, quietly agreeing, eager for the meeting to end without any trouble. With a calm smile, the Duchess added that giving this reward was a point of pride for the entire noble house. Now that the moment had come, the Duke began listing the terms. Holding up 3 fingers, he offered the knight a private mansion, a hefty sum of money, and the duchy's political support. Kai was so taken aback by the sheer generosity that he almost choked, struggling to keep his composure. Across the tea table, the Duke and Duchess humbly urged the Black Knight to accept their token of gratitude. In the Duke's mind, giving an Empire agent a secret base was a clever move. It would curry favor with the Emperor's hidden forces as well. Overjoyed, Kai accepted immediately, settling the agreement on the spot. The Duke allowed himself a small, victorious smile, convinced he had passed some invisible loyalty test. As the tension finally eased, he suggested that his daughters personally show the knight his new mansion that very day. Kai agreed instantly, promising to take good care of the luxurious property. Without delay, the Duchess called for the guards to fetch their daughters to accompany the guest. Rising gracefully from her seat, she asked the knight to follow the corridor and be guided to the visitor's room. Kai nodded awkwardly and slipped out in silence. The moment the massive doors closed behind him, the main hall fell into a suffocating silence, his hands trembling. The Duke slumped back into his chair, finally letting his tense muscles unwind. Wiping sweat from his brow, he muttered that surviving this meeting was a relief. Deep down, he admitted she'd been right. The warrior was far from ordinary. Just outside the adjoining room, the masked young man stretched his arms and exhaled, finally releasing the panic he'd been holding in his chest. Karen immediately noticed how limp and drained he looked, pointing it out with a teasing smile. Kai, trying to hide his embarrassment, joked that armor was surprisingly good at keeping emotions under wraps. With a gentle smile, Lithia invited him to sit, have some tea, and rest a bit after that ridiculous meeting with their parents. Karen, however, got straight to the point, scolding him for showing so little reaction after receiving 3 enormous rewards. Slightly annoyed, she added that he could at least pretend to smile after suddenly becoming both a villa owner and a millionaire in one conversation. Kai stretched his legs out and stopped himself from blurting that inside. He'd nearly burst with happiness. Behind the helmet, he admitted to himself that suddenly receiving a mountain of wealth was almost too absurd to comprehend. In truth, if he'd been alone, he would have been cartwheeling around in pure joy. Lithia, still calm and composed, spoke up, wanting to clarify one last thing about the reward. Sincerely, she said that if the duchy's gift still wasn't enough, now would be the perfect moment for Kai to ask for anything else he wanted. Kai, hidden behind his cool exterior, found it almost unbelievable. He already had full pockets and a mansion without even asking. Still, he carefully returned to his reserved, serious agent demeanor. Shifting the topic, he asked whether giving away one of the family's villas was really such a big loss for the duchy. Lithia smiled softly and explained that the family owned several villas, and that particular property didn't hold any sentimental value. Karen grumbled that the house was far too big for a single person to live in alone. Compared to the main residence, it was nearly on the same scale. Hearing that, Kai realized just how absurdly valuable this small gift really was. In his mind, only a completely insane noble would hand over something so luxurious as a simple thank you. With a mischievous grin, Karen asked if he planned to let anyone else live in the mansion with him. Kai, hidden beneath his helmet, let out a nervous laugh, saying he intended it as his personal base only. To Lithia, it seemed perfectly natural that such a famous hero didn't already have a wife or partner. Then Karen bluntly asked whether the Black Knight had any romantic interest in anyone. Lithia immediately blushed and scolded her younger sister for asking something so personal. Before things got even more awkward, Kai stepped in, telling them they were welcome to visit the villa anytime so it wouldn't feel empty. Karen's eyes widened instantly, her face lighting up with joy at being personally invited. Without a second thought, Kai even promised a spare key so they could come in when he wasn't there. In truth, he knew having the girls around occasionally would be the perfect cover from prying eyes. Overjoyed, Karen declared she'd happily torment his patients every single day. Lithia, full of initiative, immediately suggested they go see the villa right away. Under the sunlight, the grand mansion looked even more imposing. The living room was vast and spotless, furniture perfectly arranged. The kitchen was bright and spacious, every utensil gleaming as if freshly polished. Lithia smiled, saying it was just a small token of her family's gratitude, so Kai shouldn't feel burdened by it. Kai pushed open the heavy door, taking in the fully furnished interior down to the last plate and spoon. He wondered aloud if it was really okay for him to accept such a lavish home. Aaron looked at him and commented that he could get strangely humble at times, even though he usually spoke to her so casually. Kai stepped into the wide living room, taking in the luxurious details before politely inviting them to sit. He explained that even though the mansion belonged to him now, he wanted them to treat it as their own home and relax. Karen planted her hands on her hips and insisted she wasn't tired at all. Kai replied with a note of helpless concern, saying children shouldn't overexert themselves. Karen shot back that she wasn't a child. She realized he was being considerate, likely because her leg had only recently healed. Kai, in full black armor, spread his hands and reminded her that he hadn't used medicine on her just to have her push herself too hard. He added that if rumors spread about him forcing a duke's daughter to overwork, his life would be over. Then he joked that if she hated the sofa so much, she could always sit on the hard armor instead. Between a soft sofa and rigid black armor, anyone would naturally choose the sofa. It sounded like the perfect compromise. But instead, Karen marched over and plopped herself directly onto his lap. Kai's body stiffened instantly, and he nervously asked what she thought she was doing. Karen's cheeks blazing red, shot back that he was the one who suggested it. Kai quickly reassured her that it was just a joke and added that sitting like that couldn't possibly be comfortable. Karen, still on his lap, instantly realized her backside was starting to ache and silently regretted not picking the sofa. Lithia watched her with a gentle smile and asked if she was managing okay. Karen, cheeks still red, hurriedly insisted she wasn't enjoying this at all. Lithia's eyes crinkled with amusement as she reminded her, "I never asked whether you were happy or not." Karen lifted her gaze to Kai and asked why he was still wearing armor in his own home. Shouldn't he be dressed more comfortably? Kai explained that it was just for safety, though inwardly he admitted he wished he could take it off. Still showing his face to Lithia felt far too awkward after the clock tower incident. Since they had already met there, he decided he needed a distraction. To shift her attention, he reached out and lightly patted Karen on the head. Karen flushed even deeper, shouting that he had to stop treating her like a child and keep his hands off her head. Kai gently but firmly guided her toward the sofa, warning that her backside would keep hurting if she stayed put. Karen squirmed and flatly refused. Confused, Kai asked why she wouldn't move. He glanced around and remarked that even so, the Duke was bold to let them be alone with him like this. Lithia tilted her head, asking what he meant. Kai explained that normally someone should have accompanied them. Even after saving Karen, he couldn't be sure of their intentions, and in a place like this, anything could happen. Lithia smiled and said her father wasn't the kind of man to act recklessly. He had simply judged Kai worthy of trust. Kai nodded, understanding, though they barely knew each other. He figured such judgment came from the Duke's vast experience with people. Karen added that they had no reason not to trust him. After all, he had even used a secret medicine for their sake. Kai agreed. It was true. Lithia then suggested that if he didn't mind, he could join them for dinner. Kai declined politely. Lithia sighed, commenting on how busy he must truly be. Kai admitted it was pretty much like that. Karen chimed in, saying that if he planned to leave the city, he should at least visit her home to say goodbye and tell them when he returned. Kai refused, confessing he was afraid of meeting the Duke. The status difference was too great, and there were already far too many complications around him. Lithia stepped closer, asking him to stay in the city as long as possible. Then, Kai lowered his head in silence. He admitted that it really was a pleasant city, and he intended to linger a while longer. He even considered doing some sightseeing, though in the back of his mind, He knew there were still people looking for him. Lithia sat across from him, waving both hands frantically and making strange gestures. Kai tilted his head, confused. Karen shook her head, trying to mimic the motion, then asked what it meant. Flustered, Lithia quickly said it was nothing. Karen, expressionless, said her sister was telling her to try removing his helmet. Lithia cried out Karen's name in alarm. Karen snorted, saying her sister could punish her later. This was clearly Lithia's fault. Then Karen grabbed Kai's arm and said if her sister was jealous, she should just admit it openly. Lithia froze, whispering jealousy in disbelief, insisting that was impossible. Kai looked at the sisters, wondering if he was misunderstanding, but he was certain Lady Lithia wouldn't act like this otherwise. Karen turned angrily to Kai, demanding why he had rejected her sister so bluntly. Kai hurriedly explained that it wasn't like that. She was beautiful, high-ranking, and almost an adult. Surely someone like her must already have a lover, and acting otherwise could create misunderstandings. Lithia, looking a little uneasy, said that while she had received many marriage proposals, she was still single at the moment. Kai blinked, slightly surprised, and said he understood. Karen sighed, complaining that men always give up first. She explained that they fall for her sister, but after embarrassing themselves can't bring themselves to show their faces again. Kai commented that it sounded miserable, adding he could understand those men. Facing such extraordinary beauty, it's hard to act naturally. Karen continued, saying her sister was actually rather clingy. When she tried to get close to someone, they only became shy and ended up avoiding her. Lithia covered her face, begging Karen to stop. This was far too embarrassing. Kai glanced down at Karen sitting on his lap, thinking she had no right to criticize anyone while perched there herself. Karen patted the sofa and told Kai to try patting it the same way. He asked why. Karen ordered him to do it without asking questions. Helpless, Kai complied and patted the sofa. Lithia immediately came over and sat beside him. Karen spread her hands wide and asked, "Do you see now?" Lithia blinked in surprise, then, almost instinctively, reached out and placed her hand over Kai's black, cold metal gauntlet. Karen suggested they keep talking like this. Lithia smiled warmly and said she would be delighted to. Later, outside the Duke's mansion, a carriage waited quietly in the shadow driveway. Lithia smiled at Kai, saying he had been an immense help today, and that it was truly their honor. She thanked him sincerely for the precious time he had shared with them. As a final gesture of gratitude, she asked him to accept the family crest, explaining that completing it was a bit complex and would take about 3 days. Once it was ready, they promised to visit him personally again, and at that time also discuss the estate's management. Kai nodded, saying he understood. Karen lifted her skirt gracefully in farewell and told him to take care of his health until they met again. Kai waved back, reminding her to do the same and to hurry home without making her parents worry. As the carriage slowly pulled away, Kai waved after them and whispered a quiet goodbye, watching the carriage grow smaller in the distance. He finally allowed himself to remove the helmet. The heavy piece came off, revealing his youthful face beneath, and he exhaled in relief, muttering that it felt so much better. After they departed, the carriage rolled smoothly down a tree-lined avenue. Lithia leaned slightly toward Karen and remarked how quickly time had passed. Karen admitted with a hint of regret that she wished they could have stayed a little longer. Lithia smiled in agreement, saying she felt the same. Karen then asked whether being praised as a beauty felt good, especially since he even called her by name, which was unusually thoughtful. Lithia lowered her gaze, cheeks faintly flushed. Admitting that maybe it did, she confessed that after today's meeting she kept thinking about how, despite his fame, Kai remained so generous and broad-minded. She wondered if only someone like that could truly be worthy of the Aldi family. Karen quietly said perhaps that was true, then teased her sister, admitting the real reason she wanted to stay longer was probably just to see his face again. She pointed out that she had never seen Lithia act this way before. Lithia admitted that, after all, he was Karen's savior and very likely the same person she met at the clock tower. She confessed she genuinely wanted to see his face with her own eyes. Karen chided her not to make that expression and suggested she could simply draw his face once they returned home. Lithia replied awkwardly, appreciating the thought, but said Karen's drawing style was far too unique to be of much use. Then she turned toward the window. Karen asked curiously what she was looking at. In the distance, Kai had removed his heavy helmet, revealing his youthful face as he exhaled deeply in relief. Lithia stared blankly at the sight. Karen noticed and called out to her sister. A faint smile tugged at the corner of Lithia's lips as she said, honestly, that man had been teasing her right until the very end. Karen looked startled, asking if he really was the same person she'd met at the clock tower. Lithia nodded firmly, confirming it, and added that he was truly a kind person. Even though using such a rare spiritual medicine could have brought punishment from his superiors, he still chose to use it. At the same time, Kai thought back to Karen, admitting he did not regret the choice. If it healed her leg, then it had been worth it. Rather than worrying about himself, he wanted to see Karen live freely and happily again, just like before. Her words seemed meant to ease Karen's guilt and stop her from feeling indebted. Lithia couldn't help but wonder if this was the mark of a truly powerful man. Perhaps his presence at the clock tower had been for their sake too, guarding against the kidnappers and watching from the shadows. If that were true, she wondered just how much he had already given for them. As Kai removed the heavy helmet, he muttered that it was time for a bath. Lithia's thoughts drifted, a faint blush spreading across her cheeks. Without seeking attention and asking for nothing in return, he simply worked silently, protecting those around him. To her, he seemed like an incredibly admirable man. She quietly hoped the day after tomorrow would come soon. There was still so much she wanted to tell him. Karen studied her sister, then smiled, teasing that Lithia looked exactly like a girl in love. Lithia admitted that since he seemed to care so much, she wanted to grow even closer to him. Then she wondered what their father would say if he knew what she was thinking. Resting a finger against her chin, she sank into thought, imagining how their father might see the situation. Kai might just be one of those people too extraordinary to understand easily. She wonders silently how he would react to the things she's thinking. Sunlight spills across the street outside the tavern, painting the scene in warm tones. The innkeeper folds a cloth slowly, a trace of sadness in his voice as he admits that the thought of not seeing Kai again leaves him feeling unexpectedly lonely. He adds that when Kai didn't return the previous night, he had a sense that this day would eventually come. Kai cuts into the steak on his plate and says calmly that he won't be living here anymore, but he still plans to come back for meals, just like today. The innkeeper watches him eat heartily, chuckling as he asks if Kai really enjoys the food that much. Kai swallows a bite and nods, saying it's genuinely excellent. The innkeeper breaks into a pleased smile, saying that hearing that makes all the effort worthwhile. He adds that he'll keep waiting for Kai to visit again. Kai nods, expressing his gratitude. Leaning against the counter, the innkeeper asks where Kai plans to stay next. He suggests a few good inns if Kai is considering another place. Kai spears another piece of meat and mentions that he's acquired a house and intends to stay there for a while. The innkeeper freezes, shocked, and asks if Kai actually bought a house. Seated at the counter, Kai explains that he kept refusing, but the Duke insisted. They seem to have searched everywhere to find a suitable gift to properly thank him, which must have taken a lot of effort. The innkeeper sighs, admitting helplessly that this isn't a joke. Receiving a villa from a duke is an enormous matter. Kai agrees it sounds significant. The innkeeper, slightly irritated, clarifies that it's more than just significant. He explains that the number of villas a noble owns is itself a symbol of power, something far beyond ordinary imagination. In his view, the Duke decided that connecting with Kai was more valuable than preserving that symbol. Kai listens quietly, taking it all in. The innkeeper then asks what kind of person Kai really is. Kai spreads his hands and humbly says that he's just an ordinary man. Then he pulls out a heavy money pouch and sets it on the table, noting that he almost forgot to give it. He explains it's a token of gratitude for all the care, shelter, and advice the innkeeper provided. The innkeeper peers into the pouch, asking what's inside from the sound. He guesses it's full of money. Kai pushes it toward him, confirming that it's cash. He thanks the innkeeper again, saying that the guidance and help he offered were invaluable. The innkeeper waves his hands nervously, saying he really doesn't want to accept it. It's too overwhelming. Kai says helplessly that there's nothing to fear. He admits he's naturally stingy, but after pulling the innkeeper into such a crazy situation, he still feels guilty. The innkeeper asks what he means by madness. Kai explains that it was all the stress of hiding from the Duke's people. During that time, the innkeeper had been tense out of his mind. The innkeeper says that even so, he only wanted to do his best to treat his guest properly. Kai smiles, admitting he's genuinely glad he stayed at that inn. The innkeeper asks proudly if that means the place is pretty great. Kai nods and says that he thinks so. The innkeeper suddenly grows awkward, saying he had only been joking. Hearing such a sincere answer embarrasses him, and he insists Kai should have at least denied it or looked uncomfortable. Kai puts his helmet back on. The innkeeper laughs, telling him not to forget to visit again. Kai replies that he definitely will. Then he turns and leaves the tavern. The innkeeper picks up the money pouch, makes sure no one is watching, and loosens the cord. He's stunned to find it packed with gleaming gold coins. He wonders how anyone could casually hand over so much money. No ordinary person could ever do that. And this was the same man who had called himself stingy. Within one of the three great powers, the Holy Church, Nina pinches Mary's cheek, warning her not to sit with legs crossed or she'll ruin her pretty face. Mary mumbles, telling Nina to stop touching her face. Nina gazes at her sister and remarks that this must be what she truly looks like. Once blind, Nina now has full sight thanks to the panacea. Mary asks who Nina thinks she is and wonders how many times they have to repeat this. Nina calmly says it's the 7th time. Mary narrows her eyes, asking if it's on purpose. Nina turns away and insists she would never do such a thing. Then she adds that Mary's way of speaking is too rough, and again warns her not to cross her legs because it hurts her beautiful image. Mary leans back, saying that relaxing like this occasionally shouldn't matter. She admits it would be a problem if outsiders saw her, but says she can behave properly when it matters. She straightens her back into an elegant posture and asks Nina if she notices the difference. Nina stares at her. Mary closes her eyes, telling her to stop staring so intently. Since regaining her sight, Mary remarks that Nina has become more rigid than ever. Nina replies that she's only speaking what needs to be said. She points out that Mary's so-called occasional behavior isn't so occasional at all. It happens every single day. Mary protests, insisting it's not every day, but Nina shakes her head firmly, saying, "Yes, it really is." Mary lets out a tired little sigh, almost like she can't argue with that. Ever since Nina regained her sight, she's been brighter than anyone else around her, soaking up every day with a joy that's been growing steadily, not just today, but the last couple of days too. Mary remarks that none of them have ever seen Nina this cheerful before. Glancing at her sister, Mary adds that the man named Kai really did something remarkable. He rescued Nina on his own, gave her the panacea without charging a thing, and even used 3 bottles all at once. Nina clutches the pendant on her chest and says softly that she knows. She explains that both his looks and his heart are flawless, exactly the kind of man their sister would fall for. Mary smiles teasingly and asks if that means he's also Nina's type. Nina blushes, stammering that she's only just regained her sight and hasn't even had time to figure out what she likes in a man. Resting her cheek in her hand, Mary shakes her head a little, saying she's not so sure about that. Still, she insists, Nina is far too young to be setting her sights on Kai. If he can hand out holy medicine for free, then he must be Veltar, Mary says. And if that's true, Nina would have hundreds, maybe thousands of rivals. Nina blushes even harder and argues that, because of her age, she might still stand a chance. Mary laughs lightly, teasing, "Oh, now someone's fired up." Just then, a nun quietly opens the door and steps in, telling Lady Mary and Lady Nina that it's time to take up their duties. Mary smiles and says they'll handle it. Then she turns to her younger sister, saying it's time to go. Nina hesitates for a moment, then nods, answering softly, "I understand." The devout Ansasi sisters, Nina and Mary, carry a quiet hope in their hearts for the day they'll meet Kai again. Meanwhile, Kai stands bathed in shifting light and shadow, silently waiting for fate to unfold. 3 days later, Mary flops onto a bench and groans that she's completely exhausted. Leafia approaches and teases that she's been caught slacking off again. Mary jumps slightly, then hurriedly says, "Leafia." She insists she isn't slacking, just resting. She points out that it's been a long time since she had a chance to sit, and that Leafia wasn't even supposed to come that day. She also reminds Leafia that entering the rear garden without following proper protocol is normally forbidden. Leafia apologizes awkwardly, and Mary waves it off, inviting her to sit first. The two sit side by side on the bench, sharing a light laugh. Mary then asks if Karen isn't with her today, and if she came alone. Leafia explains that Karen is outside, talking with Nina, while Nina cleans the courtyard. Mary nods. "I see," she says. Then she adds that since the sisters are out there again, the Duke's household must have already properly expressed its gratitude to Kai. Sitting back, Leafia says she just personally delivered her father's letter to Mary's parents, and now it's their turn. Mary sighs. "So it's finally happening," she says. She explains that her younger sister has been pestering every day, insisting she wants to see him because she likes him that much. Leafia shrugs helplessly. "Karen's the same. She keeps asking if her sister will be going to the villa again today. She's finally found someone besides me she can rely on." Leafia continues, "And now she practically lives on that person's lap. Even when scolded, even when her backside hurts from it, she still refuses to leave." Mary smiles. "Does Kai really have that kind of irresistible charm?" With a soft gaze, Leafia replies that such charm can't even be described with words. "He's the finest person I've ever met," she says. Mary raises her eyebrows at that, noting it's extraordinary praise. Leafia smiles and adds that Mary will understand as soon as she meets him. Mary's curiosity deepens. "That's unusual. she says, then asks if Lifia gave Kai a generous reward during their last meeting. Lifia's expression shows a hint of disappointment. It's still being discussed, she admits. Mary leans closer. Tell me anyway, if only for reference, she urges. She explains that the Ansashi family hasn't decided how to thank him yet, so they want to see how the Duke's household handled it to avoid giving the wrong gift. Lifia's expression turns serious. She warns that Mary absolutely mustn't tell anyone else. If this leaks, she says, it'll reveal your true nature. Mary quickly nods. I understand, she says, leaning close to Mary's ear. Lifia whispers that she must speak quietly. She reveals that the reward they gave Kai was a villa and a family crest, symbolizing honor. Mary stares in disbelief. That's really all? She asks. Lifia continues, saying that Kai used the panacea and even saved Karen's life. So such compensation hardly seems enough. Lifia shrugs helplessly. I feel the same way, she admits. But at the time, there wasn't a better option. Mary frowns. There had to be some way to offer more, she says. Lifia sighs. Kai didn't ask for anything, not even the compensation we tried to give him. Mary throws up her hands. A person like that can't possibly exist. With a serious look, Lifia says, I told you from the start, Kai is the most perfect person I've ever met. She adds that even her father said the same thing, and that she herself can't even compare to him. Mary's eyes widen in surprise. Even your father said that? She asks. Lifia went on, explaining that recently her father has been going over every detail, planning for their next meeting. She added that if he doesn't prepare perfectly, he might not even be able to speak to Kai without stumbling. Mary lowered her eyes and murmured that if someone like her father finds Kai that hard to handle, then he must truly be something else entirely. A real force to be reckoned with. She asked if Lifia really thinks someone like him could just be an ordinary player in this world. Lifia replied that her father had once issued a strict order. No one under his command should ever do anything that might make Kai an enemy. Mary went quiet for a moment, then said it meant that even if Lifia had her own thoughts, she couldn't speak freely right now. She added that if Kai really is Verta, things get even trickier. His position might already surpass theirs. Even though she didn't fully understand how that organization operates, a man like him should be able to get whatever he wants. Lifia mentioned that during their talk, she actually got the sense that Kai cared more about money than the Duke family's crest. Mary froze, stunned. She said that didn't make sense at all. She argued that money could always be earned through effort. But no matter how hard someone worked, a Duke's family crest isn't something you can just pick up. She said, such a crest acts like a lasting shield, a mark of prestige that everyone respects as long as that family remains. Then she reasoned that if Kai really is Verta, and already has imperial backing, it wouldn't be so strange for him to value money over that kind of symbolic protection. Lifia added that she thinks Kai appreciated it because money lets him help even more people in need. Mary tilted her head, puzzled. Lifia went on, saying that for someone who worries about money, receiving a villa would naturally be thrilling, but someone who could barely afford such equipment wouldn't have been able to get it on their own. Mary nodded, finally understanding. From that, she concluded their side should also offer a more generous reward. Lifia then leaned in teasingly, saying she was certain Kai was exactly Mary's type. Mary's face turned bright red, and she protested, demanding to know where Lifia even got that idea. She insisted Nina had already said the same thing. Lifia chuckled softly and said, Nina really is sharp. Mary pointed at her and snapped that Lifia had no right to laugh. She was the one clearly showing affection for him. Mary warned that if Lifia kept pretending otherwise, she'd tell Kai straight up that Lifia was hopelessly smitten. Lifia panicked, calling out Mary's name. Meanwhile, Nina walked down the road, saying she was finally going to see him. She admitted she could hardly wait. At first, she explained, they had all been frantic because they couldn't find him anywhere. Even with such noticeable equipment, they still hadn't tracked him down. She confessed that she had genuinely feared he'd get scolded for using the panacea. Karen raised a finger and said that if Nina felt guilty about that, Kai would surely scold her instead. She added that rather than worrying about him, Kai would want her to enjoy her newfound freedom to do all the things she couldn't do before. Nina looked surprised. Did Kai really say that? She asked. Then she thanked Karen, saying just hearing it made her feel much lighter. Karen continued, explaining that Kai also said that even if he did get scolded, he would never regret his choice. She noted that Kai sounded like someone who really dislikes being lectured. Maybe he ignored a superior's order, Or maybe he already knew it wouldn't cause any serious trouble. Since he must have racked up plenty of merits, she reasoned, the organization probably wouldn't want to lose him. Nina touched her cheek, smiling. That really does sound like him, she said. He's the type who wouldn't bow his head if he knows he's in the right. Then she asked if Karen knew how long Kai planned to stay in town. Karen spread her hands. He said he still has things to take care of, so he plans to stick around a bit longer, she replied. She explained that he really seemed busy. Her sister had even invited him to dinner to thank him, but he refused, insisting he still had urgent matters to attend to. Karen wondered if he was out helping others or maybe patrolling the town. Nina lowered her head and said that at night, that black armor really makes him disappear. She added that it only made him seem more impressive. Leaning closer, Karen said that since Nina was so invested, she'd share a little good news. She told her that Kai often comes to the inn for lunch and enjoys simple everyday meals. Nina leapt up instantly. From behind her, Karen called out, asking if she seriously planned to run off right now. Blushing, Nina replied that of course she wasn't. She said she at least needed to thank him properly first. Karen stayed on the bench, asking if Nina planned to leave her behind. At the same time, Kai walked down the street and stopped in front of a tavern. Inside, Nina asked the innkeeper what time that gentleman usually arrives. The innkeeper stammered, unsure how to respond. Nina straightened, apologizing but insisting she absolutely needed to know. Sweating nervously, the innkeeper blurted out that Kai usually shows up around that exact time. Standing just outside the door, Kai thought the innkeeper sounded like he was being tortured. He reminded himself that he'd only come for a meal. Meanwhile, Nina pressed on, asking what Kai usually orders. The innkeeper explained that there's no set menu. Kai always adds or changes things depending on his mood. Nina asked what Kai had most recently eaten. He pointed to yesterday's order. This is what he had, he said. Nina nodded and requested exactly the same thing. The innkeeper agreed quickly, eager to comply. Outside, Kai watched the scene, thinking he had no idea the innkeeper's voice could hit that high. He notices one of the girls has a gentle demeanor, but the other looks like she could be a handful. He thinks it might be smarter to skip going in today. Still, pretending not to notice her would make him feel awful, especially since she had once held him close. In the end, he decides to step inside first. He reasons that once other customers start arriving, the tension might settle down. If he acts like he didn't notice anything, maybe he can avoid getting dragged into trouble. But then he wonders why it suddenly became so quiet at the worst possible moment. A helmeted nun steps forward to assist Nina, reminding her to keep her posture straight. Nina, cheeks flushed, nods and says she understands. The innkeeper glances at Kai with a mix of relief and gratitude, silently thanking him. Kai, a bit puzzled, says he'd like to place an order. Nina stiffens slightly, looking at him with a nervous question. Does he remember her? Kai smiles gently. Of course I remember, he says, and I'm glad to see you safe and well. Nina clutches the pendant at her chest and replies that she's just as glad to see him healthy. Kai glances at the innkeeper, who is peeking nervously from behind the door, and then turns to Nina's bodyguard. He acknowledges the man's position and responsibilities but requests that, since Nina asked the innkeeper to stay quiet, the guard overlook the earlier events. Nina's guard bows deeply, offering a sincere apology for his earlier rudeness. The innkeeper quickly waves him off, insisting it was no problem at all. He even says he should be grateful for such generosity. Then he looks at Nina and remarks that she seems completely different from before, even in her clothing. He admits he didn't recognize her at first. Nina twirls in her nun's habit, asking if it suits her. Kai replies that it will suit her even better as she grows a little older. Nina beams at him, thanking him warmly. Kai glances at her sleeves and comments that he never expected her to become a member of the Holy Church. Nina smiles, and Kai gestures to his own eyes, asking about her sight since that day. Seeing the energy in her, Kai quietly notes that she's truly doing well, and he feels a deep sense of relief. Nina lowers her head, softly admitting that she's now happier than anyone. For years, she says, she couldn't even clearly see the faces of her family. Kai responds with a hint of exasperation, telling her not to bring up such heavy things all of a sudden. Blushing, Nina apologizes. Kai tells her that, for now, she should simply lift her head and enjoy life from here on. Otherwise, he says, giving her that medicine would have been meaningless. Nina smiles, saying she understands and will do her best. The innkeeper arrives with the dishes, apologizing for the wait. Nina explains that she came because she wanted to eat the same meal as Kai. Kai nods thoughtfully, noting that she must feel a connection to it as well. Nina nods in agreement. Kai adds that if she can't finish it all, he and her guard will help her. Nina smiles and thanks him. Kai then asks if her time outside is limited. He says it'd be a shame to let freshly prepared food go cold. Nina clasps her hands together and says she'll start eating right away. The moment she takes a bite, her eyes widen with surprise, and she exclaims how truly delicious it is. Kai spreads his hands, a proud smile on his face. See? I told you. The food here is excellent. The innkeeper frowns, muttering why Kai looks so proud of someone else's cooking. Kai grumbles that only his own dish was plated poorly, then says he'll let it slide today, considering how frightened the innkeeper had been earlier. Nina laughs, commenting that Kai and the innkeeper seem genuinely close. Kai clasps his hands together and says their relationship is solid enough. The innkeeper sighs, explaining that Kai never mentioned his background or revealed who he truly is. He admits that had he known sooner, he might have kept his distance. Dealing with someone so mysterious can be exhausting. Kai suddenly realizes the innkeeper may have overshared. He turns to Nina's guard and asks if, just this once, he can pretend he never heard any of that. The guard nods, saying that as long as Lady Nina isn't upset, he can act like nothing happened. Nina smiles, reassuring him that she has no intention of getting angry. The innkeeper, drenched in nervous sweat, pleads for mercy. Kai can't help but find the stiff, panicked reaction amusing. The innkeeper protests, claiming any normal person would react the same, and points out that Kai himself is the real oddball. Nina looks at Kai and says she has something she wants to ask. Since her time outside is limited, she hopes they can set a proper date so she can visit him formally and give her thanks. She explains that she wanted to discuss a visit to properly express her gratitude. The moment he hears this, Jet Black freezes beneath his helmet. His eyes widen, and he's left staring in stunned silence, unsure how to react. Sensing the sudden seriousness, the innkeeper awkwardly mutters that he should probably step aside. Flustered, Kai nervously asks if he's expected to go visit the great cathedral himself or something. Nina quickly assures him that's not the case at all. She explains that she and her companions would of course come to his estate to give their thanks. Jet Black blinks, realizing that means she already knows where his estate is. Nina bows and adds that if this causes him any discomfort, they will apologize properly. Under the helmet, Kai is shaken. How could she know this, when he only received that villa recently? He tells her he's not upset, just impressed. Then he suggests she pick a day off for the visit, since he has work to handle during the week. Nina nods, saying she already knows how busy he is, and proposes next Sunday around noon instead. He agrees, then asks who will be coming. Nina explains that her father and mother will attend, along with her older sister, herself, and several guards. That answer leaves him speechless. Under the helmet, he breaks into a cold sweat, realizing Nina's family is far more influential than he expected. Trying to navigate the situation, he asks if he can choose who actually comes to the estate. When Nina asks for clarification, he bluntly says he'd prefer her parents not attend. She reacts in shock, but he quickly explains that he isn't seeking some stiff, formal gathering and wants to avoid drawing extra attention. From the side, the innkeeper mutters dryly about the absurdity of hearing that from a man still in full black armor. And Kai just thinks, "Give me a break." Kai continues, saying he'd honestly prefer Nina's parents focus on their work. It wouldn't be good if something happened while they were away. Even when Nina hesitates, he presses on, pointing out that they can still exchange thanks, even if her parents don't attend. He admits that high-ranking people like them intimidate him, and he absolutely doesn't want to meet them. Nina cautiously asks if that means he doesn't trust things to proceed with only her sister present, but he immediately denies it. At that moment, the masked guard steps in calmly, says the matter is settled, and Kai tells her to pass the decision along to his superiors. The guard confirms that was her intention from the start and adds that the arrangement helps a lot. Seeing it resolved so neatly, Kai quietly thinks that things are surprisingly smooth for once. After finishing the meal, Nina and her escort rise to leave. Nina politely says they'll take their leave for now and looks forward to seeing him again soon. Kai gives a simple farewell and watches them go. The moment the door closes and the bell chimes, all the tension drains from him. He slumps, hand on his head, letting out a long, exhausted sigh. The innkeeper returns, carrying another plate, and teases, asking if Kai is seriously claiming he's the tired one. He jokes that anyone would be exhausted after handling that kind of group, then adds, teasingly, that it's rich coming from the man who had just been chatting casually with Lady Nina. Kai gives in, saying maybe it's fair to call them both tired. The innkeeper studies him and admits he always knew Kai wasn't ordinary, but never imagined he could stand on equal footing with the Holy Church. Kai just thinks that if that were really true, life would be much simpler. Noticing him staring off, the innkeeper adds that Kai doesn't need to pretend around him anymore. Kai then notes something important. Even after learning all this, the innkeeper hasn't changed how he treats him at all. The innkeeper says acting normal around him is probably best for both of them. Kai admits it really does help. The innkeeper asks him not to sue or punish him later if he said anything disrespectful. Kai laughs, saying he'd never do that, and that he's not in a position to throw around words like insult anyway. He brings up Nina's bodyguard, saying she was genuinely intimidating, clearly top-class elite. The innkeeper agrees immediately, explaining that holy guards are always elite, so someone in that role would naturally be formidable. As the conversation continues, Kai remarks that, from what he's overheard, people around him already know quite a bit about him, and he admits it would have been nice to know sooner. The innkeeper suddenly blurts that he should have said something earlier because he genuinely thought he was going to die. Kai apologizes sincerely. The innkeeper adds that, even so, they really went easy on him. Kai asks what he means, and the innkeeper explains that no one tried to intimidate him with status or threats. They simply asked politely, making sure Nina had her limited free time, ate properly, and stayed on schedule. From that perspective, he says their firm attitude was only natural. The masked guard's stern behavior lingers in his mind, and the innkeeper notes that such discipline is exactly how they show loyalty. Kai comments that it sounds like a rough spot for the bodyguard too, stuck in the middle like that. The innkeeper adds that serving powerful people is probably like that for anyone in such a role, and Kai should understand that better than most. He mentions that he heard Kai was the one who stepped up about public image and status when people tried to defend someone, showing how tactful he can be. Kai admits a little helplessly that he really doesn't understand any of that world, and mostly just said whatever sounded right at the time. The innkeeper listens and says that only shows Kai lives in a position where he doesn't need to worry about such things at all. When the innkeeper wonders aloud if that means Kai might even be above some major church authority, Kai immediately denies it, insisting the truth is exactly the opposite. He explains that he's so far beneath people like that, he can't even begin to grasp their world. The innkeeper finally cuts him off, saying, "That's enough," and the discussion is over. Kai protests, asking to at least explain a bit more, but inwardly he groans, realizing the misunderstandings around him are somehow only getting worse. Meanwhile, outside in the carriage, the masked guard tells Lady Nina that she must be glad she got to see Kai after all. Nina quietly admits she had really hoped to sit at the same table and share a meal with him, and she adds, softly smiling, that she's genuinely pleased because of that. In the carriage, she asks her masked escort if she may pose a question. What kind of person did Kai seem to be from the escort's perspective? The escort answers that, without a doubt, he is a powerful man. Nina gently clarifies that she's asking about his nature, not his strength. The escort apologizes, explaining she was under constant watch the whole time and never had the luxury to think about that. That shocks Nina, and when she quietly repeats the thought to herself, the escort explains that people tend to lower their guard while eating. She says she assumed her own vigilance was being monitored to make sure she hadn't slipped. She adds that, as Nina's guard, they already carry the heavy guilt of having once allowed Nina to be kidnapped, and on top of that, they failed to detect Kai as well. She calls that unforgivable and notes that even though they had spoken with the shopkeeper, she never treated it as an excuse to relax her watch. Nina wonders aloud whether Kai might simply have an unusually faint presence, but the escort rejects that immediately, insisting it's impossible and that the difference comes down to skill. Even so, she thanks Nina for her concern. She goes on to say that Kai may have even anticipated that she would clash with the shopkeeper. To her, the timing and flow of events feel far too precise to be coincidence. Nina falls silent as the escort continues, saying that either he already knew they were heading to the inn, or he has an extraordinary eye for reading situations. She admits she keeps pondering what he truly meant by his words, and promises to report everything to Nina's father as well. Nina asks if she means the part about thanks, and the escort confirms that Nina had noticed it too. She explains that a man in Kai's position would never normally pass up the chance to meet Nina's parents, especially when he stands in a position to be owed a favor. She says that although he claimed to dislike drawing attention, that was probably just an excuse. Nina nods, realizing that explanation makes sense. Diascore adds that people often claim they dislike dealing with the powerful, but the way Kai interacted with Nina so naturally doesn't fit that excuse at all. She mentions there are even rumors linking him to Veltar, so he's probably already accustomed to handling influential people. After a long pause, Nina reluctantly says she hates to admit it, but maybe some kind of trouble is brewing at the Grey Cathedral. She admits she can't be certain, but says that, knowing Kai, there must be an important reason behind what he said. He wouldn't make such a request over something trivial. The escort immediately agrees and says they should consult Nina's father as soon as possible. She apologizes and asks if she may tell the driver to hurry. Nina nods, and the carriage speeds off. Later, at the mansion, Nina's older sister sits with her and nervously remarks that, even so, being personally requested by him still carries a lot of weight. She then blurts out, half flustered, that Kai really does have good taste. Nina immediately notices her sister's voice is shaky and quietly points it out, even noting that her legs seem to tremble. Embarrassed, her sister stammers that she simply hadn't expected him to go so far as to specifically say he didn't want their parents coming along just to give thanks. She admits that, with all the talk about Veltar and everything surrounding him, she can't deny understanding the burden he carries. Nina gently reassures her, saying it will be fine and that Kai is truly a wonderful person. She adds that he's generous, just as generous as her sister herself. Her sister reflects that maybe just going to see him as her usual self is enough. Nina agrees it probably is, but her sister immediately recoils at the thought. Nina, confused, says it's much easier to just be herself. Her sister counters that first impressions usually come from the polished version of a person and reminds herself that it's that refined version that earns admiration. Nina smiles warmly, saying she prefers her real self. Her sister is touched and promises to take those words to heart. As their conversation continues, the elder sister reflects that Kai is truly incredible. She says he was the first to notice suspicious movements around the inn and always stayed a step ahead in Aldea, based on how busy he seemed. She believes he must have been investigating all sorts of things behind the scenes. Nina wonders how he even gathers information like that, but her sister replies that it's better for them not to know. To her, that kind of matter is obviously top secret. She warns that if they dig too deep, he might see them as a threat, or worse, decide they're not worth the trouble, and cut ties completely. Her thoughts grow darker as she concludes that, however one looks at it, Kai is a complete monster in the most overwhelming sense. She even adds that, for all they know, he could be listening to their conversation right now. Nina tries to brush it off, saying, there are guards at the entrance, so nothing like that could happen. But at that exact moment, both of them hear footsteps from above, sounds that seem to come from the ceiling itself. Nina stiffens, calling nervously to her sister. Her sister forces a shaky smile, saying it must be some kind of animal. She reminds Nina that there was once an animal on the roof before, so it's probably just that again. Even so, Nina can't quite settle down. Something about the timing still feels off, a little too strange. Her thoughts drift back to Kai, and she quietly reflects on his kindness, imagining he might be watching over them just in case anything happens. But then she glances toward the entrance, remembers the guards posted at the main gate, and realizes how impossible that would be. So she falls silent. Finally, the promised day arrives. Kai walks into the inn once again. The innkeeper comments that if he were in Kai's shoes, he'd never be able to stay this calm. Anyone in his place would be replaying the entire meeting in their head non-stop. Kai thanks the innkeeper for the meal, acknowledging the sentiment. Inside, he reminds himself that today, the ruling Ansage household of the Holy Church is coming to see him. He feels a small sense of relief, knowing he at least kept Nina's powerful parents from attending, and tells himself that he's already rehearsed the first meeting in his mind perfectly. Still, one thing nags at him, speaking with Nina's elder sister for the first time. To ease his nerves, he decides that if it gets tricky, he'll just leave everything to Nina. Satisfied with that plan, he praises himself for thinking it through so well. The hand on his head, he confesses the real reason he came to see the innkeeper on such an important day. Something's been bothering him. The innkeeper notices and asks what's on his mind. Kai explains that the other day, Duke de Goat assigned a resident maid to manage the estate for him. Thinking back on the maid's stiff and distant behavior, he notes that she's kept so much distance that the whole situation feels strangely lonely. The innkeeper listens and admits he actually feels sorry for her. He mentions it sounds like a huge responsibility. Hearing that, Kai falls silent, staring blankly ahead. Kai realizes that after getting scolded by Nina's bodyguard, the shopkeeper probably no longer pities him. Looking around, he notices the place has gotten busier and that there are more staff now. The shopkeeper cheerfully says, "It's all thanks to him." He explains that after Kai started eating there, and Lady Nina came too, word spread through town, and now everyone wants to eat what Lady Nina had. Kai reflects that Nina really is that popular. The shopkeeper adds that since she regained her sight, she's been showing herself in public more often, and with looks like hers, that kind of attention is only natural. Kai quietly agrees, thinking that even at her age, it's obvious she'll grow into a true beauty. The shopkeeper then recalls something else for Kai, asking if he's heard about a new religious group that suddenly appeared and started causing trouble for the Holy Church. Nina serves. Hearing that, Kai realizes this must be the information the shopkeeper had lined up for him, and he thinks it sounds like a matter on a very large scale. He asks whether the rumor came from a customer. The shopkeeper confirms, explaining that people are spreading stories about archbishops and bishops doing evil deeds. He adds that they're feeding nonsense to believers to stir division within the Holy Church, clearly aiming to weaken the Ansage family's influence. Kai thinks that being tied to power must be exhausting if it always drags a person into this kind of trouble. The innkeeper says Kai's reaction makes sense. There's no way he wouldn't notice these things himself. Kai asks what the innkeeper would have done if he claimed not to know. The innkeeper says he probably would have given one of those vague, agreeable answers. Kai asks what that's supposed to mean, then returns to the rumor, saying the Holy Church should be able to handle something like this. He reasons that they aren't the type to sit still without countermeasures, nor would they allow their prestige to crumble easily. The shopkeeper says he'd like to believe that too, but the situation seems messy. He points out that for something that appeared out of nowhere, it's gained a lot of momentum. Kai brushes it off, confident that in the end, the Holy Church's power and reputation will prevail. The innkeeper then eyes Kai, asking if he's already been pulling strings behind the scenes. Kai denies it, but the innkeeper's expression makes him ask what that look is supposed to mean. The shopkeeper replies that he simply doesn't buy Kai's innocent act. Kai laughs awkwardly, saying that either way, he learned some very useful things. He decides he should also ask Nina about it, to see what she knows. The shopkeeper tells him that's probably for the best, since people like her would be more willing to speak to Kai than to him. He adds that they don't trust him that much. Then he says that today's bill will be 10,000 rijal, including an information fee. The innkeeper protests, saying Kai is being ridiculous because he only repeated things Kai likely already knew. And since Kai brought Lady Nina there, his meals will be on the house for a while. Startled, Kai asks if he's serious. The shopkeeper warmly tells him not to be shy and to come by again. Kai gratefully says that really helps. As he leaves, he thinks that, just as expected, doing good really does bring good back in return. When the day of Nina's visit arrives, the resident maid greets him. The maid asks if he really needs to wear the armor when meeting Lady Nina and her elder sister. Kai answers that it's just in case, because you never know what might happen. The maid adds that even if a fight broke out, he's said to be stronger barehanded anyway. Kai freezes immediately. He quickly asks where she heard that. The maid calmly says it came from Lord Dagote and adds that it's strictly internal, so there's no need to worry about it spreading. Kai quietly relaxes, thinking it was a good idea to keep the armor on. No one can see his face. At the same time, he admits that the maid has recently become someone who scares him a little. Trying to move things along, Kai awkwardly asks if she will be the one showing Nina and the others around. The maid says he can leave that to her and asks where they should be escorted first. Kai internally complains that being put on the spot like this only makes things harder, then suggests either the study or the drawing room. The maid says either is fine, so he chooses the study. Watching her, he quietly thinks he truly envies how calm and composed she always seems. Next, the discussion turns to the accompanying guards. The maid mentions that the guards will probably arrive alongside Nina and her party, and asks Kai what he thinks they should do about it. Kai pauses to think, then suggests it might be better to have them wait somewhere outside the study. He doesn't want the meeting happening under their constant watch. The maid nods, agreeing that sounds fine. Kai adds that the guards can just do as they please around the mansion. They'll probably get bored and wander off anyway. The maid blinks in surprise at that, asking if Kai is really sure about letting them roam freely. Kai asks if that would be a problem. She shakes her head, saying, "It's not, so long as he's okay with it. There's nothing to worry about." Kai notices a flicker of unease in her expression, and quietly hopes it's nothing serious. While waiting for Nina and her sister, Kai brings up that he's been thinking about sharing some of the treats Karen had delivered with the family seal. He then asks the maid if she thought they were any good. Caught off guard, the maid asks what he means. After a moment, she admits she doesn't see any problem with it. Kai nods, agreeing immediately, then asks how much a box of those sweets costs. He wants to buy more. The maid isn't certain of the exact price, but estimates around 50,000 regal. The figure hits him like a punch, and he stares, stunned at the thought of spending 50,000 regal on sweets. Still reeling, he asks about the gemmed ring he received as well. The maid says she doesn't know the exact price but guesses it's somewhere between 5 and 10 million regal. Kai can only go silent. Seeing his reaction, the maid asks if he finds the reward lacking, offering to pass along his concern to the Duke if he wants. Kai quickly denies it, explaining it's nothing like that. He clarifies that what overwhelms him is the casual way people give such expensive things, and wonders to himself if he seems greedy by accident. The maid reassures him that he does not, explaining that Lord de Goat just told her to contact him immediately if anything came up. Kai reflects on how much responsibility Lord de Goat must carry. The maid adds that this is simply how a noble keeps his honor intact. Then Kai asks if there's anything she personally wants. When she looks confused, he explains he feels bad only receiving things and wants to give her something in return. The maid gently protests, saying she's just an employee and already fairly compensated by Lord de Goat, so he shouldn't trouble himself over her. Kai steps a little closer, telling her not to be so stiff, and asks her to simply tell him what she likes. After a pause, the maid quietly admits she likes sweets. Kai lights up and says, "That's easy, he'll bring plenty next time." She accepts with gratitude. He then mentions he has work to do in the study, so she should just stick to the plan when the guests arrive. The maid nods in understanding. As Kai walks away, she thinks she should inform Lord de Goat about all this too. At the same time, she notes that Kai's casual, almost too straightforward way of speaking is exactly what she'd expect from someone tied to Veltar. Soon, the visit begins. The maid greets Lady Marie and Lady Nina, thanking them for coming despite their busy schedules. As they are shown inside, Nina's bodyguard remarks that she hadn't expected to see the maid still serving there. She explains that when the villa was given away, she worried about losing her position, but the gentleman in charge had considered her circumstances. The bodyguard repeats this in surprise. The maid adds that, knowing Kai, he could have easily assigned someone far more capable in her place. She also mentions she's never met Kai's previous staff, so she has no way to judge herself against them. The bodyguard reminds her that the focus should be on Kai, not her. The maid agrees, admitting that continuing this way will just lead them in circles. The bodyguard nods, and together they conclude that Kai is a very secretive man who gives little away, and those around him are instructed not to pry too closely. As they walk, the bodyguard comments that it must be tough having a man like that as master of the house. The maid admits she's probably the one who interacts with him most often, and even Lord Dagov once bowed his head to him. She explains that there are no guards stationed around the estate, because Kai personally said they weren't needed. Having guards everywhere would just make things feel stiff. Another servant echoes her in disbelief, and she confirms that's exactly what he said. The bodyguard interprets this as meaning Kai is confident enough to face anyone himself if needed. The maid quietly agrees. Without guards, the estate is still about as safe as it could be. The bodyguard jokes that she should be careful not to let that confidence stress her out. Then she stops the small talk to confirm one thing. Are they free to spend their time as they like, until Nina and Marie finish with Kai? The maid confirms that is exactly what she was told. The bodyguard then asks for the maid's opinion, since she lives with him and might understand his intentions better. The maid says she can't guarantee the answer, but will share her guess. She believes he didn't mean for them to just lounge around idly inside the mansion. For her, that was never the main point. Protecting Nina remains their priority, and Kai wouldn't intend for that to be ignored. She explains that assigning guards to a fixed waiting room could slow their reactions and hinder their duties. To her, Kai's do-as-you-like instruction really meant act with judgment and skill, using their own initiative. The bodyguard thinks this over, saying that in that case he wouldn't rely on them at all. The maid corrects her, saying it's not about distrust. Kai wants them not to depend on him. In her view, he's forcing them to face the truth. You won't always be there to save them. If they want to protect the smiles of those they serve, they have to develop that mindset themselves. She admits this is just her guess, but believes it's the most likely explanation. The bodyguard thanks her sincerely and asks her to pass his gratitude on to Kai as well. Meanwhile, Kai waits in the study, baffled again. He thinks to himself that he's only saying ordinary things, telling people to relax, and can't understand why everyone reacts like there's a deeper meaning. He wonders if anything he said could be rude, then concludes that it's everyone else acting strangely. Finally, Nina and Marie take their seats across from him. Marie immediately offers an apology and says she just has one question to ask. She clarifies that it's about how she should adjust her behavior around him in the future. Kai blinks, clearly confused, trying to grasp exactly what she means. Nina nods, confirming that this is indeed what her sister is asking. But it doesn't make things any clearer for him. He lets out a quiet, frustrated groan in his head, wondering what on earth Marie is talking about. Then he glances at Nina with silent desperation, silently asking himself what he's supposed to do in this situation. By the time it's over, he's practically begging for anyone to step in and guide him,